This is an NBC 13 HD breaking news report.
Welcome to the breaking news coverage of the National Transportation Safety Board's news conference following today's UPS plane crash in Birmingham. Thank you for joining us. I'm Andrea Lindenberg. We'll get straight to the key facts for you. And the Federal Aviation Administration says around 5 o'clock this morning, there was an explosion, the one you saw by the Birmingham airport. According to the FAA, UPS Flight 1354, an Airbus A300 en route from Louisville, Kentucky to Birmingham, crashed half a mile north of runway number 18. Now, it was on approach to the Birmingham Shuttlesworth International Airport. That crash happened near the Brownsville Heights neighborhood, but Birmingham Mayor William Bell confirms that no homes or buildings were damaged on the ground. Mayor Bell also confirmed the 2 crew members on board died in that crash. The name of one of those pilots has been confirmed. Her name is Shonda Fanning, a 37-year-old pilot. So far, no other injuries have been reported on the ground. Take a look at these photos from the National Transportation Safety Board. They show the plane as it sits right now. It's broken up from that crash landing. And these pictures will give you an idea of the extent of the damage and a little bit of the scene in that area. NTSB investigators are at the crash site, of course, and we're waiting for those officials from the NTSB to brief us at a news conference, which is scheduled to begin any minute now. We have a team there, and we're watching that podium. When someone walks up, we'll obviously cut away to that. Here's what we know about the pilot, the one that we told you we have the identity of, Shonda Fanning, 37 years old. She lived in Lynchburg, Tennessee. She has a pilot certification of medical first class. She's married to Brett Fanning, the owner of Jack Daniel's Distillery in Tennessee. The second pilot has not yet been identified, and of course we'll bring you the latest on air and on our website, alabamas13.com, as information comes into us, particularly the identity of that other pilot. Not long after the crash, UPS released 2 statements. UPS Airlines President Mitch Nichols spoke on behalf of UPS. Here's the quote: "This incident is very unfortunate, and our thoughts and prayers are with those involved. We place the utmost value on the safety of our employees, our customers, and the public. We will immediately engage with the National Transportation Safety Board's investigation, and we will work exhaustively on response efforts." End quote. And many people around the crash lost power when that plane hit electrical lines around the airport. Alabama Power says a total of 76 customers are without power because of the plane coming in contact with lines. Most of the outages are in the Brownsville Heights community. Crews hope to have the power restored soon, of course, as it's safe to get near the crash site and repair those downed lines. We'll keep you up to date on these outages throughout the evening. And as we've said, the plane was an Airbus A300. Pictures of the same model plane. We have these from the UPS website. It was approaching the airport, getting ready to land on runway 18. And a little information on the Birmingham Airport runways. Runway 18 is just more than 7,000 feet long, 150 feet wide. This is one of the shortest runways of the Birmingham Airport. It's what's called a non-precision approach. It's kind of technical. It means that it doesn't have instrument landing systems like 2 of the other runways. We'll bring you more information on the plane and the runway as we get that as well. And if you'd like to see more pictures from the scene to get a better idea of what it looks like out there, we have a slideshow on our website, alabamas13.com. Ashley Roberts has been out covering this story all morning, and she joins us now with the latest on the investigation.
Well, things have certainly calmed down here along Northeast Lake Boulevard. I'm standing here at the entrance to the Alabama National Guard. This is where that plane crash happened. Let me go ahead and step out of the way for you. It happened over this hill in a field this morning. Now, things are back to normal. Cars are traveling through this area without any issues. The roadway has reopened to vehicles since that plane crash this morning. But this morning, all we saw traveling through this area were rescue crews, firefighters, police responding to that plane crash. A fiery scene in Birmingham, Alabama after a UPS plane crashed in an open field, sending clouds of smoke through the area. According to the Federal Aviation Administration, the A300 plane crashed as it was approaching the airport just before dawn. We're told the pilot and co-pilot, who both died in the crash, were en route from Louisville, Kentucky. Neighbors report hearing a loud boom and several explosions.
The airplane came right over our house, and we heard a plane act like it was giving out a fuel or something, and a few minutes later we heard this loud boom, and I'm like, what was that?
The crash left the plane broken in 2 pieces, debris scattered across the airport highlands, neighbors startled and shaken. The mayor's office says no structures on the ground were damaged, but some trees and power lines were.
Never seen anything like this. It was quite a shock.
Hours later, this field where the plane crashed just 900 yards north of the airport is still an active scene as those close by try to grapple with what they've seen and heard this morning. People who live in this area say they're used to hearing planes take off and land in this area, but certainly nothing compares to what they saw or heard this morning. Of course, for the latest on this story, you can always visit our website, alabamas13.com. In Birmingham, I'm Ashley Roberts, Alabama's 13 News.
Very much, Ashley. And as she mentioned, for all the latest on this story and other news on the day, we are keeping our website updated, current for you. So for the latest information, go to alabamas13.com. Now, if you're just joining us, a UPS Airbus A300 cargo plane crashed at the Birmingham airport just outside of it early this morning. But this is not the first time a plane like this one has gone down. Linda White joins us now with an investigative look into the UPS plane crash. Linda, I saw you over there going over all this paperwork. What'd you find?
Yeah, Ani, I've been pouring through paperwork all morning, all day long, and in our investigation, we've learned this Airbus A300, tail number 155UP, has had a dozen maintenance issues in the past, and 4 of those incidents were declared an emergency, and that is all according to the FAA. The most recent one was in May of last year. Now, that plane, that crash today, is one of 53 Airbus A300 planes that UPS operates. It was put into service in 2003. Now, since 1981, according to the FAA, there have been 60 crashes involving an Airbus A300, known as a twin-engine, wide-body jet aircraft. 17 of them have been overseas. The rest have been here in the U.S. and Puerto Rico. 5 of these crashes were fatal. The last crash in the U.S. was American Airlines Flight 587 on November 12, 2001, just after 9/11. It crashed shortly after takeoff from JFK in Bell Harbor, New York, killing all 265 people on board and 5 on the ground. Now, the National Transportation Safety Board said the cause of that crash was the airplane's vertical stabilizer, which keeps the plane flying straight, and the rudder, which steers the plane. Those 2 pieces separated in flight. The engines also separated, and that plane can carry up to 266 passengers, as I said. When used as a cargo plane, that was the case for today's flight. It can hold up to 120,000 pounds of cargo. That's according to UPS's website. Also, we've learned from local U.S. postal officials that Flight 1354 was carrying about 1,500 pounds of regular U.S. mail. They understand that mail has been held in a strong aluminum container. That's what it was packed in, and they believe most of it, if not all of it, is still intact, and they should be able to recover it. We should also note UPS was fined $4 million earlier this year by the FAA, which alleged UPS failed to follow FAA-approved procedures for making structural repairs to 4 aircraft, 2 DC and 2 MD-11 planes. That fine did not include Airbus A300. That's our investigation today, and we'll bring you more as we get it later on Alabama's 13 News at 5 and at 6. Ani, we'll send it back to you.
Linda, you gathered a lot of information in a short period of time, and that's a lot to absorb. I have a question for you, and forgive me if this was a clear answer in this. Is this an issue just with the Airbus, this particular plane, or UPS, or what did you find when you were going through the paperwork mostly?
From what we can tell, there is no particular issue with either of those entities, neither UPS or with the Airbus. That history that we see, it was a variety of maintenance issues. It wasn't any one thing. And as far as the fatalities that have been, they have noted since 1981, nothing in particular stood out as to one particular cause as to why these planes crashed and caused so many deaths. 265 in that one flight back in 2001, another 10 of crew members overall. So a total of 275 deaths involving this Airbus A300. Ani, I hope that answers your question.
It did. I just was wondering if there's a common thread through all of this, and from what you found, it seems to be a number of different issues. Linda, thank you so much for that. And for the latest on the NTSB investigation, anytime, go to our website, alabamas13.com. All right, so what was happening weather-wise when the plane crashed? We always wonder that. We've had a lot of rain and lightning over the past few weeks. Here to tell us more about weather conditions this morning around 5 a.m. is Chief Meteorologist Jerry Tracy. And Jerry, you and I always talk about this when there's a situation like this. What was going on at 5 this morning?
A very good question, Ani. Obviously, we won't know the whole answer until they recover the black box and then go into the voice recordings and the whole bit. But we can look back and see what the weather is doing at about the time the crash occurred this morning. Take a look at this. This is a radar view from 5 o'clock. That's about 15 minutes after the crash. And there is some rain, light to moderate rain, falling from North Jefferson County on west through Fayette County. But it is not raining at the airport, or at least it's not raining very much. I can't rule out a couple of sprinkles here based on that one echo, but basically we're talking about a fairly dry looking scene. Okay, what about other aspects of the weather? Well, here's a big sheet and it looks like a bunch of Greek here on your screen, I know. I'm going to concentrate on one particular observation. These are all hours of observations here. That's literally when they get the actual weather data in. And if we look at this one down here, it's for 5 o'clock in the morning, so that's about 15 minutes afterwards, but it's even closer than that because the observation was taken at 7 minutes before 5, about 8 minutes after the crash. And at that time, we find the following. Number one, there's a north wind, but it's only 5 miles per hour. Probably not a big deal, shouldn't be a problem at all. Number two, the visibility, and this is significant, is listed at 10 miles. That's pretty good. Even if there were some little patches of ground fog, that's still excellent visibility. Other aspects of this, it is overcast, and we can see that there are 3 decks of clouds, one at 1,100 feet, another one higher at 3,600 feet. That would be considered the actual ceiling, and higher up yet at 7,500 feet, about 1.5 miles up in the sky. That means it was an instrument landing. That is, from high in the sky, they couldn't see the runway, but it also means it's fairly usual conditions, and planes land in conditions like this all the time. Temperature and dew point are next. The humidity is pretty high at 94%. It's possible that could mean the runway would have been a little bit damp. Maybe that would have been an issue had the crash not occurred, but overall we're looking at weather that's not perfect, but it's not too bad either. Ani.
All right, Jerry, we were talking earlier about the last crash that we really covered extensively that had to do with weather was back in 1991. It was L'Express, a commuter jet that crashed in Inslee. And that definitely was weather related. We had some severe stuff going on. I remember in the trial there was even testimony connecting those two together, but that's a totally different situation than we have here. I guess that was a microburst, downburst, I don't know what they called it.
It was a strong thunderstorm, and as a matter of fact, Ani, the other thing is it was a time of day we expect those kind of storms. This particular crash occurred early in the morning. It really wasn't that unstable outside, even though there was some rain to the west. I would assume an approach, it was a fairly smooth flight based on the observations we're seeing. So you're right, that was a much different situation with that particular crash. There were big-time thunderstorms, lots of wind all over the area, probably some strong downburst winds too, and that's very different from the situation this morning.
And we know, we always hear anchors and reporters say, you know, well, what do you think caused the crash? We can't say that. We have no way to determine that. But the NTSB likely at this point has looked at those weather numbers, and that is possibly going to be ruled out, wouldn't you think? I mean, unless there's something to do with the wet runway and that sort of thing. And
unless there's something very strange going on here, based on the weather data we see, I mean, we have to realize that there are thousands of planes that land with this kind of weather all over the country, all over the world, many, many times during the course of the year. So it's not at all unusual for this kind of weather to be occurring. And we have to realize that it could be so much worse. There could be thunderstorms like you were mentioning. There could be icing issues, which is not the case here. There certainly could be problems with other things, such as strong winds and just generally very poor conditions. Overall, despite the overcast, and that was an issue, again, he'd have to use instruments to be able to see where the runway is from high up in the sky. But other than that, conditions overall were not too bad.
All right, thank you, Jerry, for that really technical close-in look at the numbers. And I have people in my family who are in the airline industry, and even Jerry was mentioning this too, the flight in on approach. If you were on a passenger plane today at that time, you probably wouldn't have noticed a bumpy ride, not a lot of turbulence and that sort of thing. And something else reassuring is turbulence. It's tough to bring down a plane with just those alone. So pretty good flying weather aside from the clouds and the humidity. All right, the National Transportation Safety Board has crews on the scene of the UPS plane crash here in Alabama, and they begin to investigate now what could have caused a deadly accident. Birmingham officials are holding a news conference now, and we're going to go ahead and take you there live to see what they have to say about it. All right, they're not here yet. We're watching that podium, waiting for them to walk up to the mics. They're not here yet, but we will break away from that to show you that in just a minute. And also a reminder, we have slideshows, we have pictures that were sent out on Twitter from the different entities over this plane that you can see on alabamas13.com. Now, some of the key facts from the news conference we're hoping to hear is the identity of the second pilot. We don't know who that person is yet. We do know who one of the pilots is. NBC affiliate in Nashville was able to confirm that this was one of the pilots who died in the plane crash. Shonda Fanning, she was 37 years old, out of Kentucky, and we know that Tennessee. Was it Lynchburg, I believe? All right. Tell me where we're going now, Danielle. Okay. We're going to bring Linda back in. Linda has been out here with me and tons of paperwork.
Yes.
First of all, tell us where you got this and what is this all about?
Yeah, this is a combination of searching the FAA's website, the National Transportation Safety Board, as well as the Federal Administration Association, Aviation, excuse me.
And it's all public, right?
Yes, it's all public record, and really poring over the information, looking through this in particular information. I was trying to find out how many plane crashes there have been of this Airbus A300. So I found out pretty quickly that there have been 60 since 1981, and that there have been 17 overseas, as well as the rest of them have been here in the U.S. and in Puerto Rico. And there have been fatalities related to this particular plane, 275 total. Now, the largest loss of life and the last one in the U.S. occurred in November of 2001. Some of us may remember that it occurred shortly after 9/11, and that was now this is today's plane crash, and so we've been looking at cargo planes. How many cargo planes, how many of these planes have crashed? What were the incidents involved? What were the causes of those planes crashing? And nothing in particular stands out. The causes vary from plane to plane. And this aerial view, you can see where it crashed outside of the Birmingham airport, just north of the airport, runway 18, I believe is what we've been saying. And if you go to the FAA, on Flickr, the FAA actually has an account. You can see some of their close-up photos of their folks standing in front of the crash, but there you have it, taking a look at what that scene looks like on the ground. And you know, some of us have covered these before, and it's certainly a tragedy when anyone loses their life, but here we have no loss of life on the ground. It didn't come near homes, and you know what, and we think of that as sort of as a mixed blessing, and, and certainly prayers go out for the pilots of these, the families of these pilots.
Absolutely.
But you know, when something like this happens, you worry about. I have family that lives over near the airport, and
so you
I texted them this morning and said, hey, you guys okay?
Right.
And I got a text back, and they're fine. But
and that area too, it's interesting to note. I believe that, you know, there was a plan a decade or so ago where they bought those homes.
That's right.
And moved people out for, I guess it was for this, to create a buffer, and thank God above that they did that, you know, because it was in that area where there at one point were homes years ago.
Exactly. And I remember one of the restaurants was around the corner. You remember that? That
was
a
it
big
BJ's
deal.
on the runway?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And so it has moved out, and it's still accessible, but that was one of the things that, you know, had to be moved because they wanted to kind of expand this buffer, as you called it.
Right. All right. Good. Thank you so much for this. It's amazing what you can find on the web, particularly about these planes. Now, we're taking a look now. We're waiting for the NTSB to take the podium. They told us 4 o'clock, about 17 minutes running behind, understandable, as they gather the information together. So they're doing the mic checks there. The media's in place. Our camera's there. So the minute somebody walks up to that, we will talk about that. City of Birmingham Mayor Bell has already, he was talking quite early on in this situation, in this crisis, talking about the police department, the fire department, and various roads blocked off, and confirming that 2 people had died in this plane crash, both of the pilots. So we're waiting for those different entities to give us some more information. And also, if you'd like more pictures, if you want to see more on this crash, get a feel for where it happened and what the scene looked like, because this plane broke in half and there's debris scattered all over the place, you can go to alabamas13.com. Meteorologist Jerry Tracy joining us now. As we mentioned before, the first thing we think of is weather after seeing all the lightning that we've seen over the days here. Jerry, what was the weather like at about 5 a.m. when this plane went down?
Ani, there was some inclement weather across the area, mostly west of the airport, mostly West Jefferson County, going back into sections of Fayette County and Walker counties. It was light to moderate rain. There was no lightning being reported with that at the time, and over the airport itself, nothing more than a couple scattered sprinkles, and I don't even have proof that that happened. Here's the way the radar looked at that time. Now, this is 5 o'clock in the morning. The actual crash, remember, was about 15 minutes before this, and at that time, there was some rain to the west, but very little going on over East Jefferson County, Shelby County, St. Clair County, and even this stuff back here was not big-time thunderstorms with strong winds and lots of lightning and all that kind of stuff. It was relatively tranquil rain falling at light to moderate rates. Okay, so that doesn't look too bad. Certainly, we've seen many radar images look much worse than that during a plane landing that happens to be successful. So we're going to look at something else. This is a basic rundown. Back in the old days, and I'm showing my age here, but we used to call these standard airways observations, and they always began with the letters SA. Times have changed, and we've moved on from that now. We used to get this data only in teletypes, and now it's available on the web to anybody. We're looking at especially this observation here. It says 0453. It's actually considered the 5 a.m. observation. It's taken about 7 minutes early, and this would be about 8 minutes after the crash occurred. Now, what we're looking for here is any evidence of strong winds, any real low ceilings, or any precipitation. What we find is that the winds from the north at 5. Ani, I think I have to toss back to you.
All right, we're going to go straight to the news conference now. Let's listen.
Board. The NTSB has arrived in Birmingham to begin the investigation of the accident involving UPS Flight 1354. Before I go on, I'd like to pause a moment and offer our sincere condolences and let you know that our thoughts and prayers are with the families and the victims and the friends of those. We are thinking of you, and you are in our prayers. The NTSB, we'll start with that. We are an independent federal agency charged by Congress to investigate transportation accidents, to determine the probable cause, and then to issue safety recommendations to keep those accidents from happening again, and that's what we're in the business of doing. As far as factual information is concerned, this was UPS Flight 1354. It was on a scheduled flight from Louisville, Kentucky to Birmingham. The aircraft is an A300-600, A300-600F, and the F stands for freighter. The registration number of the aircraft is N155UP. And as has been reported, the aircraft crashed while on approach to runway 18 here at Birmingham Shuttlesworth International Airport. The NTSB's GO team arrived here in Birmingham. We landed about 11 o'clock this morning. We had an investigator on scene actually about 9:15 this morning who drove over from Atlanta. And today what we've done is just an overall initial assessment to begin planning the next steps of our investigation. But I can tell you from the preliminary information that we've gone out and gathered from the initial ground impact, and bear in mind that there were tree strikes prior to the initial ground impact, but from the initial ground impact to the final resting point of the forward fuselage, which contains the cockpit area, that distance is about 200 yards. And then another 75 or 80 yards past that, closer to the runway, that is, there would be the part of the fuselage that contained the wings and the tail section. And that part of the aircraft, especially the over-wing portion, was extensively damaged by fire. The tail section of the aircraft is still smoldering, still smoking, and for that reason we have not been able to get in and get the black boxes, if you will, the cockpit voice recorder, the flight data recorder, but the first responders are out there continuing to put water, fire retardant, on that section of the fuselage, so we are optimistic that we will be able to get in there quickly and recover those crash recorders. The NTSB has responded to this crash with a 26-member GO team. The investigator in charge is Dr. Dan Bauer. Dr. Bauer has over 20 years of investigative experience with the NTSB. Our GO team consists of, we will break it down into several groups, and just to give you an idea of what some of those groups are, we will have a special group, a group of experts looking at the aircraft structure, power plants, survival factors, human performance, systems, operations, air traffic control, weather. We will be looking at everything that may be relevant to the causation of this accident. In addition to our investigative staff, we have members of the NTSB's Office of Transportation Disaster Assistance. They will be helping to provide support for the family members of the victims. I do want to emphasize that we are just at the very, very beginning stages of our investigation. There's a lot of work to be done, and that work will begin in earnest tomorrow morning. Throughout the next few days, we will be gathering factual information. Our goal is to find out not just what happened, but more importantly, why it happened, so that we can keep it from happening again. I want to emphasize that while we are here on scene, we are just here to collect the perishable evidence, the perishable information, which is, in my opinion, the information that goes away with the passage of time. So we will be tomorrow morning with the assistance of the FBI's ERT, Evidence Response Team. They will help us to document the wreckage. They have special measuring devices that can very precisely help us diagram the wreckage. We'll be collecting records that we can analyze later. Records for the aircraft, records for the flight crew. We'll be looking at collecting weather information, the ATC tapes. Those are the types of things that have already started, but will continue in much more detail tomorrow. But we're not here in Birmingham. We are not here to conduct any analysis, and we will not be determining cause of the accident. And nor will we, in any case, speculate on the accident. We will be providing updates as we have information. We will be doing press briefings when we have information that we can share with you once we find that information. Eric will be giving you some information in just a moment on how to follow us, but I would encourage you to follow us on Twitter, and our handle is @NTSB. And we also put out press releases on the NTSB's webpage, www.ntsb.gov. As far as a final comment, I would like to thank the first responders from the local, state, and federal authorities. They've been working, providing great cooperation throughout the day. They've been working very hard, and we certainly appreciate their hard work and their support. I'd be delighted to answer any questions that you may have, and we'll start with right here.
Small. Two questions. One, did the aircraft impact at the crest of the hill or on the hill? And secondly, or you want to have
No, that's...
The second one is a broader question. Is the board worried? This is the third incident that we've had in about a month now of aircraft having trouble landing. Are we reaching a critical point? Is the board worried about what they've been seeing the last time?
So the first question is, where did the aircraft impact? Did it impact at the bottom of the hill or at the crest of the hill? And we will be very carefully, that will be actually part of the analysis. But from the preliminary information, it looks like it came through some trees, and then at initial ground impact, we've not been able to go back and look at the first tree strikes. We were just inside the field where the aircraft struck. So we will be going back and to the north to document the tree strikes. It appears that the aircraft went through some trees and then initially impacted towards the bottom of the hill where a fireball, where there's evidence of fire. Then it went up the hill where it came to the top of the hill and came to its final resting point. The second question that was posed was, are we at the NTSB concerned about this accident and other accidents? And I'll answer that by saying that we are concerned about any transportation-related accident. We're here right now to focus on this accident and see what the facts and circumstances are around this accident. We will analyze those in context, but yes, we are concerned anytime there's a transportation accident.
How close did this come to the subdivision?
The question is, how close did this come to the subdivision? Again, we've only looked within the confines of the fence of that field, but it did come right over the top of a house just on the other side of that perimeter road to the north and came right over that house.
Some people heard or found debris at the rooftops. You know the area, is it miles of debris found?
The question is, how much does that debris field extend out to the north where the initial tree strikes were? And that will be what we will be doing. We will be going out and very carefully trying to go back through that initial impact zone and see what's there. I would say that if anybody has any debris in their yard, we would like to know about that. So do we still have the witness mailbox set up? There's a mailbox, an email address that I would encourage anybody that might have any debris from the wreckage from the aircraft in their yard or on their house or wherever. We would like to know about that, and that email address is witness@ntsb.gov. Again, witness@ntsb.gov. There's a question here. We'll do a question here and then back to here. Yes, ma'am. Do we know who the pilots were? The NTSB is not the agency that would release those. That information would come from the local medical examiner's office or from the airline itself. There's a question back here.
Can you confirm that there was no distress call or any communication indicating they had problems on board?
Can I confirm whether or not there was a distress call or anything like that? The initial information that we have, subject to verification, is that there was no distress call from the pilots. There's a question right here. Yes, sir. Yes, sir, please.
Have you looked into the maintenance records on this A300 itself?
Have we looked at the maintenance records of this aircraft? And we will. I want to emphasize that when I say we're here to collect the perishable information, that's that information that can go away with the passage of time. That might be typically witness recollection. That's something that can go away with the passage of time. We want to get out there and document the wreckage because it needs to be done quickly. But something like a maintenance records or training records, we can go and capture those at any point. We will be, we've sent somebody to Louisville, which of course is UPS, the airline's headquarters, and we've got somebody in Louisville now that will be going over the maintenance records. We'll have a group looking at the training records, those kinds of things. So the short answer is we will be looking at that, and we'll be looking at that within the next few days. But here we just want to capture the perishable information. There's a question here. Was the plane carrying any hazardous materials? And we want to check on that. So we'll be looking at what that manifest consisted of. Yes, sir.
A report out of the FAA that the plane dropped about 9,000 feet in 2 minutes.
Question about have we learned anything about the descent rate of the aircraft? When we get those recorders, we will be able to know fairly precisely what that aircraft was doing. There's a question right here.
There was a report from a pilot that the patty lights were out. Can you say whether or not that was the case on 1-8? And if they were out, what impact would that have on the plane's ability to land?
So were the precision approach, the PAPI lights, precision approach path indicator lights, were they inoperative? We will be looking at that. We'll be seeing what condition the airport facilities were in, the navigational aids. We'll be looking at all of that. David wants to know, there was a NOTAM that went out on the PAPI right after the crash, and I don't know the answer to that. However, I will point out that the airport, that runway is closed because there's been a crash, and they may not want to keep that PAPI in service because there was a crash. And so I think that's fairly routine to take a navigational aid out of service after an accident.
The investigation right now still in its preliminary stages. We know that NTSB is here with a 26-member GO team led by Dan Bauer. They're going to be on scene tonight, tomorrow morning, and however long it takes. They're looking for information. Again, want to recap the important information. Of course, 2 pilots on board UPS Flight 1354. That is an A300 Airbus 600F. The F stands for freighter, a cargo plane, essentially, again, crashed here as it was trying to land on runway 8 here at the Birmingham International Airport. Let's go straight to video from the crash scene from early this morning and kind of unfold events as it happened for today. You know, again, the crash happened just before 5 a.m. as it was trying to land in it ended up crashing rather in an open field not too far from Birmingham International Airport on the north side, if you will, in a hilly area. The residential area is actually called Airport Highland or Zion City area, and the crash site is surrounded by lots of homes. So folks who live here, they're used to hearing planes take off and land. That's normal for them, but of course they're not used to hearing crashes, if you will. So we got a chance to go into the neighborhood and talk with some of the folks who basically woke up because of the explosions. Here's what a few witnesses, and we also spoke with the airport's authorities chairwoman, Gaynell Hendricks. This is what they told us earlier.
The airplane came right over our house, and we heard a plane act like it was giving out a fuel or something, and a few minutes later we heard this loud boom, and I'm like, what was that? Wow. And we had no idea that it was our airplane. Well, I had to come to the end of the driveway, and we saw all these police officers, and then we saw where the plane had crashed. I'm like, oh my God. Wow. Just looked like a lot of debris was like, and burnt grass and everything. It's pretty scary.
And I saw the flame in the sky, in the top. See the flame, this big explosion right here. I saw the flame, and I hear the house shake, just like it was an earthquake.
We don't have a lot of other information right now, so we're just waiting for that information from them. They're pretty much going to handle the site.
So you just heard from folks who live in that area, as well as Birmingham Airport Authority's chairwoman, Gaynell Hendricks. Want to bring you the latest again from the NTSB press conference that wrapped up. They actually said before the plane crashed, there was 3 strikes. It hit some trees before it made that initial impact. Right now, we do know that the bodies of those 2 pilots have been removed. Investigation will continue tomorrow morning, and here's what they're looking for right now. They're looking for those black boxes, you will, the flight data recorders. NTSB spokesman, Mr. Robert SUMWALT, told us that right now the tail of the flight, that Airbus 300, is still smoking. So because of that, they couldn't get on scene to get those black boxes. Those boxes, of course, will hold some possibly critical recordings that will give them insight to exactly what happened moments before the impact happened. So tomorrow morning, the investigation will pick up, and they're going to be looking for any clues, any tips, any debris. Earlier we talked, any debris that is. Earlier we mentioned that for folks who live around the area, if you have video, if you see pieces of the wreckage in your yard or anywhere, what you need to do is definitely email witness@ntsb.gov, witness@ntsb.gov. They're looking for any type of clues, information that would just kind of give them more information to what happened. Again, NTSB stressing that right now their goal is gathering the facts, what happened today, this morning, and hopefully using that information to prevent future crashes. Just want to recap, 2 pilots on board that flight that was flying from Louisville trying to make a landing here on runway 18 here in Birmingham. 37-year-old Shanda Fanning of Lynchburg, Tennessee. One of the pilots, we're still working on the identity of the other one, on UPS flight 1354. again, died this morning, early morning crash here at the Birmingham International Airport. We're still sifting information from NTSB. We'll continue to process that and bring you the very latest tonight at 5. And of course, Hillary Goldstein will join us as we continue our team coverage at 6 with what's next on this investigation. Ani.
All right, Bettina, thank you so much. And Bettina's been out there since shortly after it happened, gathering that information for us. We're going to go to Jerry. First, I do want to point out, though, one thing that was said in this news conference is, to their knowledge, there was no distress call put out by the pilots. Another question, were the approach lights on or off? Someone had asked that question, and the NTSB representative said, well, after the crash, they're off because they don't want that runway to even be considered for landing. So just some other interesting facts from that. Jerry Tracy joining us now. Jerry, he did mention weather a couple of times because they're going to gather all the evidence from pilots to air traffic control, what the weather was like, that sort of thing. And you can tell us what it was like right now at 5 a.m.
And Ani, he did talk about the fact that the ceiling was 3,500 feet. Now, what does that term even mean? Well, that's the base of the most significant cloud deck that we can see. Now, this is later on. This is well after crash time. This is the helicopter. And as you can see, the visibility and the ceiling have become much, much worse. At this time, I'm going to estimate the visibility was about 4 or 5 miles, whereas when the crash occurred, it was 10 miles. That's when that rain area from the western part of the county moved in. Look at the ridges in the background. You can hardly see them, so the visibility has come down a great deal. But when the crash occurred, that visibility was still 10 miles and the ceiling was 3,500 feet, a lot higher than it was during these chopper pictures. And overall, what that simply means is when the crash occurred, visibility was not a major problem. The ceiling shouldn't have been a major problem. We don't think weather played a major impact based on what we can see. There was a north wind about 5 miles per hour. That's a bit of a breeze, but it shouldn't be strong enough to cause any trouble for these planes. You know, it's amazing, Ani. I remember being in Fort Myers, Florida, which was my first TV job. Back in 1985, there was a horrible L-1011 crash in Dallas, Texas. And I remember looking at the observations that were coming in, and the wind had gusted to about 105 miles per hour. It was a horrible thunderstorm, and the pilot just couldn't react. In fact, he reacted so fast, he took the plane up and he stalled out. That was a terrible, terrible loss of life. This situation, obviously much different. The wind was not a major factor. There was no rain of consequence falling at the time. The skies were cloudy and there was a fairly low ceiling, but one that normally pilots can manage overall. Ani.
All right, Jerry, and to give you some perspective, I grew up here, and many of you probably did too, and when you went to watch planes, like your parents would take you out there, you would go not on the side where you go to the airport, but you go out on the back side. You get off there on the road to Tarrant, take a right and go out there where the Coca-Cola plant is, and if you went farther down, there's the 117th. Now, if you keep going down that road, this area that we're showing right here, that's from what I can gather, that's looking toward Birmingham on one of those back perimeter roads that you usually don't end up on. So this plane would be coming in, and you all correct me if I'm wrong, coming in as though it's approaching downtown Birmingham, only at the airport. Okay, all right, so approaching from almost north, I guess. So that's, you may or may not have been able to see it from I-59. I go out there quite a bit on my dinner break just to, as a weather and aircraft geek, to watch planes land. So that's one of the areas on the back corner of the airport. We're going to roll tape. We're going to go back and show you some more from the NTSB press conference, a news conference there, so you can listen and pick up some of the facts that we've picked up for you.
And as has been reported, the aircraft crashed while on approach to runway 18 here at Birmingham Shuttlesworth International Airport. The NTSB's GO team arrived here in Birmingham. We landed about 11 o'clock this morning. We had an investigator on scene actually about 9:15 this morning who drove over from Atlanta. And today what we've done is just an overall initial assessment to begin planning the next steps of our investigation. But I can tell you from the preliminary information that we've gone out and gathered, from the initial ground impact, and bear in mind that there were tree strikes prior to the initial ground impact, but from the initial ground impact to the final resting point of the forward fuselage, which contains the cockpit area, that distance is about 200 yards. And then another 75 or 80 yards past that, closer to the runway, that is, there would be the part of the fuselage that contained the wings and the tail section. And that part of the aircraft, especially the over-wing portion, was extensively damaged by fire. The tail section of the aircraft is still smoldering, still smoking, and for that reason we have not been able to get in and get the black boxes, if you will, the cockpit voice recorder, the flight data recorder, but the first responders are out there continuing to put water, fire retardant, on that section of the fuselage, so we are optimistic that we will be able to get in there quickly and recover those crash recorders. The NTSB has responded to this crash with a 26-member GO team. The investigator in charge is Dr. Dan Bauer. Dr. Bauer has over 20 years of investigative experience with the NTSB. Our GO team consists of, we will break it down into several groups, and just to give you an idea of what some of those groups are, we will have a special group, a group of experts looking at the aircraft structure, power plants, survival factors, human performance, systems, operations, air traffic control, weather. We will be looking at everything that may be relevant to the causation of this accident. In addition to our investigative staff, we have members of...
That's just a bit of the taped interview with the NTSB. To see more on exactly what this scene looks like, it's an extensive scene out there inside the perimeter of the airport. The slideshow on the UPS crash is on alabamas13.com. There's also information, too, for the folks who live in that area. They're still trying to figure out the extent of the debris field. And if you find anything, if you live in that area, you see something in your yard that wasn't there before, don't pick it up. They want you to email them at witness@ntsb.gov. Now, for everyone else on the computer, if you want to follow an interesting site for updates on this crash, past crashes, anything in the future, this is a good one to have. Follow them on Twitter at NTSB. And the website's pretty easy too. It's ntsb.gov. We're not going to know the cause of this crash for quite some time. Possibly, it could go on for a year. We don't know. But what he says they are here in Birmingham to do is to gather all the perishable evidence, and then they will take that back and work from there. So we won't have answers quickly. Coming up at 5, we've got about 30 seconds before we're going to break away, and we'll come right back for our 5 o'clock news. Linda White is in studio. She's had a mound of paper here, some really interesting things. The maintenance records of this particular plane that crashed, along with the history of the A300-600. John Pappy also investigates the particular hazards or the quirks at our airport with the ramps there, the landing strips. So we'll be right back with complete coverage of the UPS crash at the Birmingham airport.